In the early 1960s, the world was still trying to understand something terrifying. How could millions of ordinary people participate in mass murder? How could neighbors, teachers, and clerks become executioners? After World War II, many believed the answer was simple. Only monsters commit atrocities. Only cruel people follow evil orders. But a psychologist named Stanley Milgram was not convinced. He believed something far more unsettling, that evil does not require hatred. It only requires obedience. To test this idea, he designed an experiment. Not to study criminals, not to study soldiers, but to study normal people, men with jobs, men with families, men who believed themselves to be decent. The experiment took place at Yale University, one of the most respected institutions in America. That mattered, the building looked official. The scientists wore lab coats. The environment felt serious, controlled, and trustworthy. Volunteers were recruited through newspaper ads. They were told they would take part in a study on learning and memory. They would be paid for their time. Nothing about violence, nothing about pain. When each volunteer arrived, they met two people. One was a stern-looking man in a white coat. The other appeared to be another volunteer. They were told one person would be the teacher and the other the student. The roles were decided by drawing slips of paper. But the drawing was rigged. The volunteer was always the teacher. The student was always an actor. The student was strapped into a chair in another room. Electrodes were attached to his arm. The teacher was shown a large machine with rows of switches. Each switch was labeled with increasing voltage, 15 volts, slight shock, 75 volts, moderate shock, 150 volts, strong shock, 300 volts, intense shock, 450 volts, danger, severe shock. The teacher was told that every time the student answered a question incorrectly, a shock should be delivered. Before the experiment began, the teacher was given a small sample shock, just enough to feel it. It stung. That made everything feel real. The student was separated behind a wall, but his voice could be heard. At first, the questions were easy. The shocks were low. A wrong answer. A small shock. The student reacted with mild discomfort. As the voltage increased, the reactions changed. At higher levels, the student began to complain. He said his heart was bothering him. He asked to stop. The teacher hesitated. The scientist calmly responded with phrases like, "Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on." The language was polite. Not threatening, not angry, just firm. As the shocks increased, the student began to scream. He shouted that he could not take the pain. He begged to be released. At one point, he said he would no longer answer. Then, suddenly, the screams stopped. Silence. The teacher sat frozen. They believed the man on the other side of the wall might be unconscious or dead. Many participants protested. They asked if the student was okay. They said they wanted to stop. They showed visible stress, hands trembling, sweating, nervous laughter, stuttering. Some begged the scientist to check on the student. The scientist did not raise his voice. He did not threaten them. He simply repeated the same calm instructions, and most of them obeyed. 65% of participants continued all the way to the highest voltage. They believed they were delivering potentially fatal shocks to another human being. They were not sadists. They were not violent criminals. They were ordinary people who had been placed in a situation where authority felt stronger than conscience. What made this so powerful was not the shocks. It was the environment. The experiment took place at Yale. That meant legitimacy. The scientist wore a lab coat. That meant authority. The procedure was written. That meant structure. And structure makes people feel safe. Responsibility felt transferred. Participants often said things like, "I was just following instructions. I assumed the experimenter knew what he was doing. I didn't feel responsible." They did not see themselves as the cause of harm. They saw themselves as tools. This is one of the most dangerous psychological shifts a human can make. When responsibility disappears, morality weakens. When someone else is in charge, conscience becomes negotiable. The experiment showed that cruelty does not always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from obedience. Milgram concluded that people are capable of terrible actions not because they enjoy them, but because they want to fit into a system. They want to be seen as cooperative. They want to avoid conflict. They want to obey rules. The authority figure did not shout. He did not force them. He simply claimed legitimacy. And legitimacy is often enough. Later, participants were told the truth. They learned the shocks were fake. They learned the student was an actor. Many were horrified by what they had done. Some laughed nervously. Some cried. Some refused to believe the results. The ethical backlash was enormous. Critics said the experiment traumatized participants. They argued that it crossed moral boundaries, and they were right. Today, this experiment would never be approved, but its lesson remains. The experiment did not reveal monsters. It revealed something far more disturbing, that under the right conditions, good people can do bad things. Not because they want to, but because they are told to. History is filled with examples of this. Bureaucrats signing papers, soldiers following orders, workers enforcing rules. Most atrocities do not begin with rage. They begin with procedure, forms, commands, uniforms, titles. People obey systems long before they question them. The Milgram experiment did not explain everything about evil, but it exposed one uncomfortable truth. Morality is fragile. It bends when authority feels absolute. It weakens when responsibility feels distant, and it collapses when obedience becomes more important than empathy. The most disturbing part of the experiment is not how many people continued, it is how normal they looked while doing it. They did not laugh. They did not smile. They looked conflicted, and they continued anyway. This shows us something vital about ourselves. We are social creatures. We want approval. We want order. We want to believe someone else is in control. And when fear of disobedience becomes stronger than fear of harm, we press the button. The experiment asks a question that still matters today. Would you stop? Would you refuse? Or would you tell yourself the same thing they did? It's not my responsibility. They know what they're doing. I have no choice. The danger is not that humans are cruel. The danger is that humans can become obedient enough to ignore cruelty. This story is not about electricity. It is about authority. It is about how easily the mind hands over judgment. It is about how systems can turn normal people into instruments of harm. And that is why this experiment still unsettles us. Because it does not show what evil looks like. It shows what normal looks like when it is placed in the wrong hands. This was a page from history's shadows, and this is Shadow Pages.